Hello everyone, here's the Lawful Evil DM with a brand new video called Dungeoneering. The goal of this series will be to teach both new and veteran DM on how to make great atmospheric dungeon room by room. In this first episode, however, I will teach you the first part of my recipe to make great dungeon, the prelude, or what to do before actually designing the challenge and the specific adventure that your player will have. But first, a suborning advice. Dungeon doesn't mean dungeon. Before starting, you have to understand a dungeon can be anywhere. It is tempting to put a dungeon in a nearby wooded area and make it a cave or an ancient tomb, but really, a dungeon can be anywhere, even a library. For example, the player character might want a particular book in this library and might want to break in during the night. But do they know about the security system, or do they know that the headmaster is in fact an evil cultist? So keep an open mind and, most important, surprise your player. Do they just want to visit their favorite shop? Maybe they find a shopkeeper corpse and hear noises from the back store, which is also the way to the apartment of the shopkeeper. Now, don't overdo it, and use those type of dungeon from time to time only. After all, dungeon trope are not trope for nothing. They're fun! Dungeoneering Part 1. Before the masonry. Before even thinking of the first challenge you're gonna put your player through, you need to establish multiple things that will make your dungeon feel rich and deep. Number 1. Feeling is a wicked weapon. You need to establish a tone for your dungeon. As such, I suggest that you walk away from the traditional, "oh yeah, I want it to feel like Dark Souls." Because, while great, you don't focus on the single most important thing here, the player character. Instead, I would suggest for you to choose 3 feelings you want your player to have, or that some NPC clearly express that may spark a conversation, maybe even starting some debate around the table. I suggest the use of a wheel of emotion to get everything just right. If you don't know what it is, by all means, Google it. Alright, so let's make an example. Let's say you want anxiety, which is fear. You want anger, and you want grief. Anxiety is perfect for the dungeon design. Make the room small with low ceiling and little light, and sometimes a strange noise coming from afar. Grief from an NPC having done something unwillingly, like killing his wife while under the effect of a spell or curse that he himself think he triggered. He is now a prisoner here, looking for redemption or punishment. Anger from the player character, as a wizard, maybe the boss of the dungeon, laugh while retelling the story of the prisoner and say that he intends to do the same to the player. Try to use those feelings as much as you can as background element of the dungeon, adding them to the type of trap and even combat you will put in the dungeon. Of course, music is vital here. Find yourself at least 2 battle team and 3 atmospheric team that really embody the emotion you want to express. Of course, I suggest that you use Syrinscape for that, or, well, search YouTube. Those are the 2 best options here. 2. Lore matter. Your dungeon was not built in a vacuum. Why do the drow care about the Old Dwarf cemetery? So, the first ingredient to your dungeon is 5 pieces of lore. It can be history, religion, and even, why not, trade. They can even be completely random if your world is not set in stone. Or they can mirror each other in some ways. Example 1. This place is a vampire castle on a fortified island. 2. It has been built here to protect an ancient trade route. 3. The first ruler of the castle, right before the vampire took over, was a dwarf king. 4. Each house on the island have words carved on their door. You are welcome here. See lore piece number 1 and the vampire limitation to know why. Number 5. The castle is partly made of some stone from very far away that are extremely resistant to acid. See lore piece number 2. Now, how you give those lore pieces to your player is also very important. Indeed, you should not give them everything all of a sudden. You don't even have to give them all the lore and keep some bit to yourself. The most important thing here, don't force the lore on them. If they are not interested by a lore point, name it but don't give more info. If they are digging by rolling skill checks and asking questions, then you can give more information on the subject matter. Maybe the trade route was with a vampire lord and that's how they took over the castle. Sometimes not giving the lore right away and make them realize it is even better. After all, showing is better than telling. Maybe they find a secret door in the basement of the vampire castle, where the architecture is completely different. Indeed, they have walked into a long-forgotten dwarf vault. How come this is here? Of course, your 5 lore should reflect the emotion we talked about earlier. I will, down the line, make a video where I will do those steps with you. Here's my way of giving my 5 lore piece. 1. 1 is given to the player usually before entering the dungeon to create anticipation, in this case, the vampire castle lore. Number 2. 1 is interesting and might or might not come up. It is not that relevant unless one player really dig deep and make the connection, like the ancient trade route example. Number 3. 1 is to be discovered easily while traveling inside the dungeon by the player and might give them advantage on social interaction or skill checks in a skill challenge. The stone that resists acid might indicate a trap that uses said acid, which is a very valuable information. Number 4. 1 is more obscure and seemingly strange, may be the key to an alternative puzzle, which give them some reward, like a magic item. In this case, it would be the remnant of the dwarf presence, and maybe the localization, on the dwarvish map, of a secret vault containing treasure. Number 5. 1 can be discovered before or after the dungeon and is relevant to the dungeon in the fact that it is linked to the rest of the world. In this example, the door with the carving, so vampire can enter all house freely near their lair. Important note, those are seeds that might spark the interest of your player. You may extend freely the lore if the player keep asking questions or if they theorize about it. Often, a piece of lore that fascinated your group can become a quest in its own right. 3. No connection, no interest. As I said, a dungeon is not made in a vacuum. You need to link it to the world and the character. First, link it to your player in at least one way. The easiest way is a good old quest. I know, it is a simple advice, but it is important nonetheless. Another way is to link it to the background of a character, like the ship that your character used to work on, discovered, empty, in the middle of the sea. Another way is to link it to an NPC important to your player, such as the old and now half-burned down monastery where a love interest used to train. You could also link it to the class of a player, maybe a druid grove or deserted catacomb full of fallen paladin. Secondly, link it to at least 3 mundane elements. If people live in it or used to live in it, you need to add some mundane element. It can be a bathroom or some place to eat. Anything really. I will give you some bonus point if you mix the mundane and the fantastical. Good example of this would be to point out in some way that the vampire lord modified the castle on arrival, removing the master kitchen, which is somewhat useless to him. Lastly, link the dungeon to another part of your world. It could be a city, a faction, some legend, history, name it. Is it in the middle of a conflict? Is this conflict public or secret? In short, open the door to possible quests. For example, if there is a link to the dwarfs, maybe the player would like to resell the old crown they found in the dungeon. How would the king in place would take it? If they try to resell it in town, would the shopkeeper even accept it? Maybe the dungeon is linked to another. In short, the more link you make between the dungeon and the world, the more the story will develop organically and the dungeon will feel in its place. So that's it for the first episode, folks. On episode 2, I will teach you to design your dungeon by mixing 4 techniques: the 3+ solution, the 5-room system, the CNPR system, and the STF system. This video has been made possible by the use of some program and website. For the sound part of it, I have been using Syrinscape. It's an awesome program for the DM that want great soundtrack that don't want to search for hours on YouTube. Go check it out, it's really cool. For the visual of the dungeon, I have been using Virtual Battle Map, which is a very powerful tool to both map the dungeons and take picture to help your description of the room and setting a tone. For the overland map, I have been using incarnate.com. I also use Pixabay for some free of right image. If you really want to see more of those type of video, please leave a like, or if you really loved it, go check my Patreon. Alright, do me some favor, go train the tears of your player and bring me back the news.